my name is Dionna Wright. I'm the Director of Community Conversations with York College Center for Community Engagement. I'm here with a great panel of individuals today who will introduce themselves momentarily. We're going to spend some time talking about an upcoming production that Cal's going to speak about briefly, and really just have some conversation about the topics that are touched upon in the show, as well as maybe how it might relate to our community and some of the things we see and experience. So I will start. Cal, maybe you can introduce yourself, your role, and just any other interesting things about yourself.
So my name is Cal Weary. I am the CEO of the Weary Arts Group, a local performing arts organization housed in South Central PA. Also a member of the Downtown Rotary and a member of the Downtown Rotary Board, as well as president of the Parliament Arts Organization and a member of York Excel. And the History Center, I'm on the History Center board also. Currently, I'm directing Twilight, LA, 1992 or 92, which is a show premiering this month at DreamWrights.
I'm Jim Tyson. I am a pastor here in the city. I'm also the group violence intervention project manager for the city of York. I'm the president of the board of Friends and Neighbors of Pennsylvania Incorporated, which does the homeless street outreach. And Friends and Neighbors also assists in our GVI work. I'm also on the board of the Y Community Development Corporation.
Peace and blessings, everybody. I am Jamiel Alexander, aka Bro JLA. If you know me, depending on if you know me from back in the day, you can call me Mill. I am a husband and father first. I work for Aspen Institute, Forum for Community Solutions, where I am the youth-led program manager, where I run a portfolio around healing center organizing. That's my career here locally. I have the honor of serving with everybody on this panel. I couldn't make this panel up. Sister Jada, the queen herself, NAACP, Cal Weary with Parliament Arts Organization, the good brother Jim with GVI, and even big brother Jose Santiago when it comes to the youth organizing here. So humble servant, Black boy to Black man, trying to do the best I can. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jada Richardson. I'm the Equity and Inclusion Community Planner for the York County Planning Commission. I also serve as a commissioner on the York City Human Relations Commission. And I am a board member at DreamWrights starting this year. So that's something new for me. And I am most of my lifetime resident of York City.
Hello, everyone. Jose Santiago. I am with the YMCA. I'm the director of community development for the YMCA of the Roses. I sit on quite a few boards and organizations. There ain't enough time for me to explain all that. But anyway, so I'm here because I was invited, and I appreciate listening to the conversation and being a part of it. Thank you.
People who are getting ready to go see the show and may not know much about the show, just a little bit about it, and maybe kind of what led to the decision to move forward with Twilight LA.
Twilight LA deals specifically with the time from the end of 1991 to the beginning of 1993 and basically 1992, with the beginning of the Rodney King beating that was videotaped, and actually even more so dealing with specifically the trial that then led to the riots, revolts, what have you. The creator of the story did over 300 interviews with people who were alive and involved in those times. And that boiled down to about 48 monologues that were all put into a piece that we're performing. It originally was done as a one-woman show where she played every single part, including playing male, female, different ethnicities. She covered all of it. And we are performing it with an ensemble of 8. So they're breaking up all the pieces separately, but we still have people playing outside of gender, outside of ethnicity, because it's even a request from the creator that you make people play parts that are different than their actual ethnicity and or gender. It's for a reason. The most interesting piece right now for us is how similar the times feel. The most major difference between the two, and this will sound slightly harsh, is that Floyd died.
I remember seeing the video for the first time back, I can't remember how many years it is now because time just flies by. But I remember seeing the video for the first time and seeing this man being beat down for no reason, and thinking, my first thought was that Latino men have been beaten down for years, in many communities, and nobody ever talks about it. Not saying that that nobody should be beat down. People should be treated like humans. First of all, nobody should have to go through that, no matter where they come from, who they are, what race they are, whatever. They shouldn't go through that. But I remember that being my first thought, and then move all the way forward and look at some of the stuff that's happened in the past couple of years. Thinking, wow, things have changed, but they haven't. We're just in a revolving circle. That's just my initial thought. I remember seeing that, and holding back the tears, thinking, what the heck is going on? What is wrong with people in this world? Why can't we all treat each other as humans?
Can we all just get along? I'm paraphrasing because he said something. Why can't we all just get along? It was something like that he had said at one of the press conferences, and I kind of forgot about it as I was even doing the process. That's where it came from. Even the way it was laid out in living color, they used it, and other just in other like comedic forms over the years. It just happens to a lot of things as things become galvanized, and but it wasn't that plea that he had at that point was about what was happening after the verdict came out. If you grew up the way some of us grew up, you saw that happen with police officers to people before. Or if you ever spent any time in jail, you saw people get beaten way worse. Not to say it was okay, but way worse than that in jail, and you'd never hear about it. This one was special because everyone saw it from all these different walks of life. And very much like an Emmett Till situation, where something that happened all the time, now it was being documented. It forces the hands of those who kind of been able to sweep it under the carpet and pretend it wasn't happening, because now it's right in your face. And in this situation, like with Emmett Till, it set the fire underneath the civil rights movement. With this, a riot came from it because the people who it was handed to them to deal with this in a way that would have shown justice, they didn't do it.
So I was born after this happened in '95. And I think my first interactions or knowledge of the Rodney King incident was in like history class or something, maybe during like Black History Month, and learning about some things that Black people have overcame. And I remember it being kind of like once over. Like it wasn't like we learned about this major injustice that happened and we discussed this in the context of why relations with the police and the Black community are so tense today. It was kind of like, this thing happened, but we're past that now. And, it's the past. But I studied journalism in undergrad, and we actually covered the Rodney King incident as a way that journalism has like helped move the conversation forward about policing. And it was talking about the way that the riots and the incident was covered. It was like the first time you see this beating in full detail, like on TV, and it's just like broadly known that not only it happened, but you see it happening.
Yeah, I didn't really learn about the Rodney King riots or anything that happened in school growing up. Similar to you, Jada, I didn't hear about it until like I was an adult. And I think I was just so desensitized and used to not having justice or things not really working out that I didn't really know much about it. Just to be honest, it wasn't something I was familiar with. A lot of things that happened that manifested into this, and that it didn't just happen in a vacuum. It wasn't an isolated incident, and that were a lot of contributing factors that led to such a widespread riot. And I'm wondering if you agree with kind of those takes on it. What are your thoughts on, can outside factors influence, that what came from that verdict?
You can draw those parallels right here to our own community. We're experiencing so much violence in the community, but people are living in poverty. Kids are growing up in a school system that can't provide them an adequate education. And so you think about all of these factors that break down like people going out into the world and being, positive and happy and not wanting to be violent. Like those break down a person. And so when things like this happen that break the contract, as Cal said, you can't be surprised when people respond in a way that you might, reduce to being like menacing behavior. You can't be surprised when the system is failing people, that people then go and behave just in the way that the system wants them to. It's kind of, they go hand in hand, in my opinion. So it's like, people talk about, what is it, Haslow's hierarchy of needs. When people's fundamental needs aren't met, they can't operate at their highest selves. And so when you're putting people in a situation where their needs are constantly going unmet, something's going to happen that really causes them to act out because they have had enough and they need someone to see them.
When it's all said and done, concentrated poverty was a system created on purpose. Gerrymandering, redlining, you want to do your history. So I'm kind of agreeing, but at the same time, bringing it back to the former white dominance and structural racism. And because like these are outcomes that were designed. This was a system that was designed. So with that being said, there's levels of when the community when the village doesn't feel the warmth of they will burn it down to get it.
I still don't know what's going to happen. Like, I have no idea if Derek Chauvin's going to be found guilty. I just really didn't know. And so I wonder how that must have been. And I remember the city kind of preparing, we don't know what's going to happen with the verdict. So and I wonder if, when the Rodney King riots were happening, if that was kind of that expectation of, they're definitely going to get convicted. Like, it's on tape. Of course, this is going to happen. And kind of what that must have been, if that was a shock or if that was kind of prepared, if they knew that there was a possibility that they were going to be found not guilty on all counts or something like that.
Biggest difference between Rodney King, for me, biggest difference between Rodney King and George Floyd, once again, I will say this, we had to watch a person die. We had to watch a person die to get the verdict we wanted. We watched other verdicts that have happened in time leading up to George Floyd, were dead to rights. They had information. It was a Tavon that was followed and he defended himself and was shot. I'm right about that one, right? There's so many. I start mixing the stories together. It's horrible to say that, but but with Rodney, we watched him die in front of us, and no one could fight it. Even the people who normally would have argued differently couldn't argue it. So we have to die. We have to die to get justice. You cannot just get beaten.
Brother Cal talked about, back in the day when he was, so 30 years, so what, I was about 10, long story short. So I remember seeing it, and almost like Brother Jose, it was more so like, damn, that happens around the way all the time. This stuff made national news. Like, this happens around the way all the time. Like, literally, it made national. So what's gonna happen? So when the riots occurred, hey, something got to be done. I'm not here to judge.
People may not understand why they're burning down buildings or why they're tearing up the neighborhoods or why they're doing what they're doing. But that's a form of understanding that people need to listen. And if you ain't gonna listen, we're gonna make you listen. It's just is what it is. And if and understanding that piece, understanding that people feel they're not listened to. They're used, they're abused, they're set aside, they're not given the opportunities others are, things like that. So if that's the way we can make you listen, we're gonna make you listen.
When I did actually watch the beating of the Rodney King of Rodney King that predated the riots, I felt trauma that kind of came up in me, but especially when I was watching the George Floyd video, the whole video, I was just so emotional and overtaken. And I felt like all the trauma of every, mass incarceration in my family I was feeling in prison and police brutality. And so I'm wondering, if maybe that was part of it too, of just when we see things that we collectively have experienced, even if it might not be impacting us directly, in that moment, does it touch on or bring up things that, happened to me in the past or somebody that I know, and now I'm acting out because it's brought things up for me.
Thank you, Dr. Wright, because there is a collective trauma. Like literally, it's a collective trauma. Like you're right.
I was 32 when Rodney King, that whole scenario went down, and I remember the news coverage, and I think one of the things that we as people, and right, wrong, indifferent, we have this tendency, if it doesn't directly affect us, and certainly what happened with Rodney King, what happened with George Floyd affects the those in the Black community, but you have all these other people like myself. Oh, well, that happened out there. It happened in LA. It happened whatever. And we have this ability to distance ourselves and commodify people. And I think that's a big thing that our country and the system that we have here tends to do. We commodify people. We place this like there's some value we can place. Well, that person's worth this much. This one's worth that much. And coming from a pastoral perspective, we are all created in the image of God. You cannot place a value on that.
It's starting to feel like a bad sitcom, if not a sitcom, a bad drama or a soap opera, where, these shows that you watch, season 1, season 2, season 3, it's all fresh stuff. And you get to the fourth, mind you, I'm a theater person, and so that's I always think of things this way. You get to season 4 and they start recycling storylines, and I feel like we keep recycling our storyline. And the reason why we keep recycling is we don't have enough writers who are coming up with fresh material. So those who write the material are those who are writing our laws and who are creating policies, and those who are keeping things at status quo in the way they always been done. So that's why we keep having the same storylines happen. How can you have something like George Floyd happen when 30 years ago you had something like Rodney King? Is the thing that's been learned that you didn't have the guys get off scot-free, or Aubrey, whose guys did not get off scot-free, because is that they didn't get off because of the fear of what would happen if they did? Or is it because justice is actually being done?
I think a lot of that has to do with the stories that we've been told about who we are. I was actually having a conversation earlier about, back in the 90s with the whole super predator idea and how Black people were describing their peers. Like the whole idea of the super predator was to describe, the Black guy who's going to come in and like rob your store and like rape your wife or whatever. but there were Black people who were being used to push this narrative forward about Black people. And because they feared the consequences of that, they played into the system that was being used against them. But, you know, more on that point, like, of the system repeating itself, I feel like Black people have been deprived for so long of so much that it's hard for Black people to see a different way.
One of the things that concerns me, and Cal, you said it, the repeating of things, you know, it's that old adage, we keep doing things the same way, expecting a different result. And sometimes I think we get caught up, and we have people maybe who are sincere, but who end up playing into a smoke and mirrors game. You know, if we fix this issue here, or if we fix that issue there, when again, from a pastoral perspective, the issue lies right here. It's in the hearts of people, right? The system is made up of people, and it's the people who created the system. It's people who run the system. It's people who operate within the system. And until the hearts of the people in those systems are changed, then those systems are just going to continue to eat up and spit out.
When it's hard for you to see a different way, you don't find a reason to, I think it's harder to find a reason to even participate in the making of the system better, writing the script. Like, oh, I hate this show. It's a terrible story, but it just is what it is, rather than, you know what, I'm going to become a writer and like make this better so that we can actually enjoy it in the future. I think that that's by design though. Like you said, you know, with the verdicts that we were getting, you know, whether people were being found guilty or not, that's the system working as it was designed to do.
When we have violence in our communities, how it's referred to as black on black crime. I have never in my life heard of anything called white on white crime or Spanish on Spanish crime, but the way that when you can say that a group of people kills themselves, it automatically makes them into being savages that can't be reasoned with. And therefore, it makes their lives mean nothing, and therefore the reason why you have to have something called Black Lives Matter. Because if you don't, at least in concept, because the viewpoint is that these people don't even care about themselves, so why should we care about them at all?
From a white perspective, and even when I came into the city as a pastor, not say, oh, I'm here to come and help you. No, to come in and say, what is it that you need? You tell me, you know far better than I do. Let me hear that and come alongside and do whatever I can. And I think until our conversations take a serious look at ourselves, we can talk about systems and all of that. Until we are honest with ourselves and take a serious look at who we are. And I'm pointing to me as, you know, certainly part of the group that created that system. Until we take a serious look at who we are, then it's going to be difficult to really see change.
We've seen the Rodney King incident that was 30 years ago, and then just last year or the year before that. Now time is really odd at this point, but you know, you see George Floyd and nothing happening there. It's, how can you expect anyone to, you know, want to make things better? Why should people think that things could get better if Rodney King happened 30 years ago and we're here today having the same exact conversation about injustice?
Going back into the heart of people, you know, because systems are created by design. But the hope that I have is the fact that, like, when it was all said and done, there was a level of things that are starting to occur now as far as policies and procedures that kind of came out of that. But at the same, so now we're at this era of like, okay, not trying to reform the system, but literally creating a new era in our county, in our city. So I'm gonna just kind of keep that. I'm gonna just keep that hopeful.
Rodney King beating, was it pretty unique around that time for it to have been captured on video? That was unique then, right? Because there wasn't body cam footages. And
so he was just out on his balcony, from what I understand, and he was just, testing his camera and just happened to catch it. There are no accidents. For those of us who are people of faith, you know there was not an accident that he caught that. And just the fact that he happened to be there with his camera and boom. But also, what it then made happen was because when later on you have, this is footage that's been brought in, it was also the main reason why it went to trial was because they had that evidence, but then also the main reason for the riots because the world saw those videos. There are more than just, when it comes to George Floyd, there are multiple videos from that. There's one that most of us are used to, but my goodness, not only are there all the cell phones, but there were all these other body cams from police officers and cameras that are built into the Big Brother structure of downtown LA, like all that, not LA, I mean, but of their city. So all that stuff is there. You can see all of it. Is that any different than what we saw from Rodney King? You could easily see what happened there. I graduated in 1992 from high school. So for me, one, directing it, and two, having lived at a very formidable time when you're just starting to, I was like 17 years old, turning 18, really at a time when I'm starting to question the viewpoints of those that taught me. I have a mother who graduated from high school in 1969, so she was in York during the revolts, the riots, whatever you want to call them, from 1969. Moved to New York right then, was part of that whole thing. So I was raised by someone who looked at this sort of thing as this is what happens when we don't get what we deserve, or when they don't get what they deserve, when there's no justice. I grew up with that around me. But everything, I mention this only because everything that my mother ever told me about 69 in York always seemed like ancient history to me until Rodney King. And then I saw it in front of me, because up until that point, I had never seen anything like that in front of me or in my times. And then, like was said earlier, the Watts riots, that, and what's been happening now, they all have connections to each other. But like I said before, and not be the broken record, it always comes back to feeling like there's a broken contract.
You got the 69, and then you say, we had the LA. I missed what brother Pastor Jim was saying, because I had to step off for a second. But then even with Floyd, and I almost feel like that actually there's a mirror of 69 to rest in peace, brother Floyd, because that was everywhere. And for real, that was and even if we think about it, if I want to kind of just sit this here for a minute, as far as 2020, like the whether it be the summer unrest, whether it be the unrest, the uprisings, because I've heard it, realizing the fact that, and this goes back to, I almost feel like us, York County, being what you said as well, because you're talking about little old York and where we sit at as far as central PA. You know what I mean? We all know, whether it be Philly, Baltimore, DC, New York, like we are right here. Pittsburgh, we're right here. And one of the things I wanted to, the hope I want to kind of bring in this moment is a way where, like, and as much as, things were going on, there was a level of, relationship building that occurred. Because like I said earlier, like there was a moment where, not just, we were on standby. And I'm saying we, because I put myself in it, because like we were at a level, we all know how our county is. And I am not going to act like we don't live in a subliminally, AKA Trump era now, out blatant racist county at times. So if y'all won't say it, I will.
It pains me when I think about how I grew up, kind of a suburban white kid, and the assumptions that are made. And here's what I found out coming into York City. When I go into any Black church in New York City, I get more hugs and more love than I'll ever get in a white church. All right. But people don't know that, right? And unfortunately, a lot of people don't care to know that. We got to change that.
And I think that that plays a role in the nature and like where our community is today. But it's also, I think, is a play on how the Black community is sometimes just reduced to being, like it was said earlier, savages, and like nothing good comes out of the Black community. And I think that same idea is spread right here in the York community. But when you think about it, the Articles of Confederation were written right here in our community. York plays such a major role in the history of this country. But for whatever reason, the nature of our community is to play it small and to act as though what happens here doesn't matter. And when from the top down, the idea that it doesn't matter, no one's worried about us, whatever happens here isn't going to change anything. When that idea is what you're constantly being bombarded with, why would it matter to you to change or to make a difference or to want to do something other than what is supposed to be the idea of what York is? I think our community has to get really clear on what its identity is if we want to see change. And that's not something that I think we've done in the past. And I think that's something that even in moving forward and trying to prevent another situation like Rodney King from happening again is we have to get clear on who we are and what it is that we will stand for and won't stand for.
I watched a documentary the other day that was on the crack epidemic, and they literally mentioned York, Pennsylvania. Of all the little towns they could have mentioned, they're talking about LA and Chicago, New York, Atlanta, everywhere, and it said, and even in the small towns like York, Pennsylvania. So there's something about bringing a show like this here, because guaranteed we are always in the mix for some reason when it comes to this. As small as our little town is, we're always in the mix. So I think if anything starts with healing, if this is the way art is used, the same way a piece of art like Birth of a Nation was used to galvanize the idea of we need to be afraid of these blacks because they're going to rape our white women and they're going to kill all of us and take everything we have. The way art was used in that negative way, this is a way that Twilight Los Angeles tells the stories of people who lived during that time and can be used to remind us of our history so we're not doomed to repeat it again and again.
So when I talk about systems, like we have to be careful. I don't care who it is. I'm talking about we as people, all people. We don't marginalize and ostracize and othering. You talk about that hierarchy needs, like that sense of belonging. Like we sometimes create our own systems that push other people away. So where I am and hoping that with this particular Twilight, we can begin to not even just conversate, but literally put practices and procedures in place so that the generations behind us will be better than where we are.
Institutions and such, one of the things that happens to all of them, and I say this to any nonprofits I'm a part of, when your organization or institution becomes more important than the mission and the people, then you've already failed. You failed at what you're trying to do, because we are not a world full of organizations and institutions. We are a world full of people, and people are what are important.
To the same reruns, the same rewrites of the same thing, because until we start like removing not the things that are good about us as separate people, but the things that we start removing the viewpoint that I'm for some reason different than you in a negative way because of the amount of melanin that's in my skin, how are you supposed to think of me? What are you supposed to think of me? How do I change your thought on that? Do I have to assimilate completely to your world? Do I have to pick and choose the places where I go, the words I speak, the car I drive, the school I attend or send my kids to, the area I live in? So I might have gone a little far, but
Until we sit down together and realize we're people. We all want our families to succeed. We want to have love and peace. And, until we can really engage in that kind of way, maybe I'm too idealistic and such in this. It's a lot of hard work. It's not something that's just easy and you flip a switch and it happens. It's serious work. It's work like what's being done here with the play, where it challenges and engages us to enter in to each other's lives. Sorry for long wind there.
The arts have a way of healing and even connecting us. You feel me? So this is that right there, and a better understanding, a better of how we, learn to live and coexist. So I want to recognize that, because one of the healing tools, I'm putting my Aspen hat on. It's just what I do. One of the tools we always talk about is the arts, whether it be theatrical or even nature, and how we can use that to kind of make sure as people we continue to unite. So I want to make sure I put a stamp in that, Cal. Much respect. And I know DreamWrights is hosting this, so it is what it is.
Thank you so much for sharing. And Cal, maybe you can just kind of close us out with some things that you hope that maybe people can walk away with knowing. And if you want to do a plug for the viewers on the show, please feel free to do that too.
Well, I would hope that people who come to see the show don't come with the expectation that you're going to watch this and all of a sudden all the answers, will unfold for you. That this is the beginning of the conversation for most of us. Even for those of us who've fought our own fight, who've been in some way, shape, or form doing activism, it's the beginning of a discussion. It's a great piece of work, and it shows how the arts can be used to have conversation, to spark conversation, and also to keep having conversation about things from our history in a different way than we normally would have them. It's static and fixed. It is in your face, and it is real. It's the real world words of people. It's the real words of people being spoken to people. And I think if there's one great thing that I would hope that people would take away from this, is that they would have great conversations at home. And the way that we're doing the show, every single night will be slightly different. We're using multimedia, and we have original score pieces that are being created for it. And so there will be what's considered live mixed. And when something's done that way, that means that slightly things will change as far as the videos that are being used. Things will be changed in the audio. And so every experience will be slightly different. So I'd love to have people come out. We open at the end of January into the last weekend of February, 2 weekends, and I really hope to have folks come out for them. I'm sure they'll post the actual dates on the screen at some point. And I hope to have folks come out and enjoy it more than one night with us. It will be an experience that will drain you, but I do believe that there's something that can be gained from being drained, because that allows you to refill with something better. So it will definitely be a feeling of an emptiness to be filled. And so I hope to have as many people come and enjoy this as we can have. Obviously, we're respecting what's happening with COVID, and I'm relatively sure at this juncture that we'll be this will be done as a hybrid show, so folks will be able to see this in a way at home also. So that'll be figured out as we get closer to the event. But I do believe that it's a great healing process for those of us in New York. And I want to say this one last thing, because I have to do the reverse of what I said earlier. The same way that I believe that York is this little place, that things happen in bigger places and still affect us, and we're still in alignment with LA and New York and Chicago and Atlanta and Austin and all those big cities all over the world. I also believe that a little tiny York can be the epicenter for greatness. The ripple in the pond can begin with us that goes out to the rest of the world. I think we have a direct connection for those things that come here, and I think we have a direct connection for what things can happen in a little town and go everywhere else. So that is what I hope that you find your way to start the ripple in the pond.